A few weeks ago, I was reading a newspaper article talking about traffic and growth and new construction and the stress of it. And then I thought, wait, that sounds a lot like today. But actually, it was a newspaper article from the 1980s in Utah. And interestingly, in Utah, we've been growing constantly throughout the decades. We've always kind of been growing. A lot of times people say, oh, it's just happening now. No, it's been going and continues to go. So I want to tell you a little bit about a project called Ochre Mountains. Does everybody know where the Ochre Mountains are? They're directly west of here and in Utah County and also in Salt Lake County. And if you can spell ochre, then you can go to college. It took me a couple months to learn how to spell that. And then also view, like Mountain View Corridor. And so our vision for this project is to provide a thoughtful planning process to prepare Salt Lake County for the future. And a lot is going on there. And we're here to collaborate and talk about it. We just finished our phase one, which was this existing conditions research, and I'm going to share some information on that today. Looking from Bangerter Highway west to the top of the Ochre Mountains, north to Salt Lake, and then south to Utah County, where we are today. And then right now we're doing some public involvement. We have a survey that just closed, had 2,500 responses. And then we're doing our plan for the West Bench. And a lot is going to happen in the West Bench in Salt Lake County. And even if you're in Utah County, it still relates quite a bit. So here's a little bit about the growth in Salt Lake County. From the year 2000 to 2017, we had an increase of 135,000 residents. That was 57% of the growth in Salt Lake County and 15% of the statewide growth. Phenomenal amount of population growth. And one thing about population growth in Utah, about 2/3 of it is just natural births. That's families growing, that's Utahns having babies, and then about 1/3 moving in. Now, when you come to a place like Lehigh or Draper, it's a little bit higher in terms of net migration, with people coming in to work in Silicon Slopes and places like that. But in general, when we talk about growth, it's Utah families growing. It's not the outsiders moving in, it's Utahns growing. So this is a really cool map looking at growth over time, and it's by decade, actually 2 decades at a time. And so you'll notice Salt Lake City, pre-1940s, and then as you march south and west, you see how the growth has gone over the 2 decades. And what is happening now in Harriman and Draper and Riverton is the same thing that happened in Holiday or in Sandy in the 1980s. This growth hits a city and then they build out. And that's what's happening right now also here in Lehigh and also Saratoga Springs, really kind of building out. So one thing we took a close look at is what kind of land is developable over time. And this is in all of Salt Lake County. There's about 40,000 acres of developable land in Salt Lake County. That is still a lot. And 32,000 acres of that is west of Bangerter. Most of it is inside the cities, West Jordan, South Jordan, Harriman, Riverton, and a little bit also in the unincorporated. On the map, you'll notice right here, this is the prison site. That's about 629 acres. That's going to be coming online in just a couple years. The prison's going to be torn down, and then essentially it'll be kind of a mini city rising up. That's a state project, and so you'll see quite a bit of density, and that'll tie right in with the Silicon Slopes building that's going on. Salt Lake County is going to grow by 600,000 people by the year 2065, and Utah County is going to add another 1 million residents by then. So if you think things are busy now here, just watch and see. It's going to even get busier. So it tells you there's going to be a lot of opportunity from growth. One thing about jobs and economy is that west of Bangerter and Salt Lake County, there's 33 jobs per 100 working adults. In Salt Lake County as a whole, there's 84. It has the most jobs per working adults in all of Utah. And then for comparison purposes, you can see Sandy and Draper is about 72 jobs. This tells you that there's a lot of opportunity in Western Salt Lake. Residents are tired of commuting. They want to be closer to home. Each day, about 80% of resident employees are leaving Western Salt Lake. So they're commuting to Salt Lake City, they're coming south to Lehigh, they're going to Sandy. There's a lot of commute that's happening. There's not very many jobs in Western Salt Lake County. And so the more opportunity, the more businesses can bring jobs closer, I think there'll be good opportunity there because people really do want to reduce their commute. This shows you where job density is. The majority of the jobs are on the I-15 corridor, Redwood, 215, kind of gives you an idea of where jobs are located. And then also you have Rio Tinto down in the southwest. This is a cool map showing you where people are going from southwest Salt Lake County. Majority going to the north, some going to the east, and then a little bit south here to Utah County. And the farther south you go, Bluffdale, Riverton, Harriman, that picks up a little bit in terms of going south. I'm just going to mention one thing on transportation. Who here drives Bangerter Highway on a weekly basis? Are you liking the interchanges? I'm seeing some nodding heads. That's a good thing that's happening. You're getting a few minutes of your life back every day. You'll notice the dots here on the map. The green dots are interchanges that have already been completed. The blue ones will happen in the next couple years, and then the red ones are planned but unfunded. So eventually, Bangerter will be a highway that goes all the way from north to south, continuous flow with no lights. That'll be a big improvement for planning. And then Mountain View Corridor is expanding on the north and south, and that'll be a great connection between Salt Lake and Utah County. Okay, here's something about housing and income. When you talk about housing, you have to look at incomes at the same time. And one thing about real estate in Salt Lake County, it's gone up 38% in the West since the year 2000. But you look at incomes have also gone up about 39%. So housing in terms of single-family homes and incomes have increased about the same. But the big one is rent. Rent has gone up 87% since the year 2000, almost double or more than double the income. And so that's a big factor in the housing market, is how the income is not keeping up with the rent. And so this is something to be watching and in terms of Salt Lake County and government leaders and developers that we're looking closely at. This kind of shows you what single-family homes have done since the year 2000. You see the peak in the year 2007, and then the bottom, the recession, and then coming out of it. Everybody asks about Bluffdale. They were just building large homes on large lots, and that product didn't come back after the recession. They kind of came back to reality a little bit. So look at the incline on rent. You'll notice it's a lot steeper. It matches up with the previous information, how the pricing of rent is really going up fast. Tells you it's cheaper to it's a lot cheaper to buy than it is to rent long term. So I think a lot of opportunities for townhomes, condos, and small lot single family in the future. So we've had a major shift in the housing market in Salt Lake County, and Utah County is also going through this shift. So take a look at the information here on the left, the year 2000. We were building mostly single-family homes at about 69%. In the red is condominiums and townhomes, and then apartments in blue at 21%. And then you'll notice it stayed about the same the year 2000 and then 2010. But then looking at 2017, in the last 10 years, we've had a major shift. Now it's 37% single family, 27% townhomes and condominiums, and then 30% apartments. Going forward, I don't see it being like it was in the early 2000s or the 90s with mostly single-family homes. The housing market has shifted, and it's a mixture of townhomes, condos, single-family, and apartments. Not all the same. Here's a little bit about water. My neighbor back there, Wes, asked me about water when we were talking about growth for a minute. In our report, we did a lot of research on water, talking with Jordan Valley Water Conservation. And the big thing about water is that it is going to be available in the future. There are major water sources such as Strawberry Reservoir and potentially the Bear River Pipeline and other items to bring water to Salt Lake County, but it's going to be a lot more expensive. Not only is the cost of transporting the water, the infrastructure, but also the energy of pumping it up to the slopes in western Salt Lake County and also providing it. So this is something to know, is that when it comes to water, it's just going to cost a lot more. And the majority of our water usage is in landscape. And so the more water-wise our landscapes can be, the better. So one thing also about water is that per capita, if you've ever thought about, well, what are different ways that we're using water? Well, as density goes up, water usage goes down. People living in apartments and townhomes and small lots are using less water because of less landscape. But then also, the cross-axis is that it's going up per acre, and so we need that infrastructure in that location where we're going to have density. Here's just a little bit about parks. Parks make they're a huge factor when it comes to lifestyle. What would New York City be without Central Park? What would Salt Lake City be without Liberty Park? Almost all good cities, all big cities have nice parks. And so here's a little study on parks, 2 ways to look at it. Acreage per resident, and then also looking at, can you walk to a park from your house? Studies show that if somebody can walk to within a half mile or a quarter mile distance from their house to a park, they're going to use it more often. They're going to be active and they're going to be healthy. And so having parks spread throughout cities is very important. And in this part of the growing part of Salt Lake County, we're doing pretty good. There still is more opportunity to increase parks. So here's one of my last slides. This kind of tells you a little bit about the Ochre Mountains. It's owned by Rio Tinto, and it's a lot of property. And this is just kind of a summary of what's going to happen with all of that land. The areas in blue are near term. These are things that could happen within the next decade or two. And then the areas in red and yellow represent after the mine closes, what could happen there. And so in the south, jobs and housing, and then in the north, jobs and energy, and then along the bench, master plan communities in western Salt Lake County. So our project website is called Ocreview. I just gave you a short summary of a 175-page report. I don't expect you to read it all, but if you want to go look at it, we have about 40 to 50 maps online, kind of ArcGIS online maps that you can zoom in on and take a look at that. So this gives you a brief understanding of the growth that's happening in Salt Lake County. It's similar to Utah County and other parts of Utah. So any quick questions? I see that I have 1 minute left. Yes?
How much of the report is dedicated to the prison development?
No, it's not. We're looking at western Salt Lake, and the prison is more in the middle.
Is there any other report dedicated to that?
If you send me an email, I can get you some information and the state representative that's in charge of the project. But we do cover housing countywide. There's a lot of things that are actually countywide in the report, so I can get you information on that. But there's a lot of opportunity with the prison site. So, okay, well, thank you.